Okay, it's 5 after. Let's get started. Welcome everybody to the Garden Street Public Information Meeting. And thanks again for taking the time to join us today to learn more about Garden Street and the Bikeway project. The Ada County Highway District is designing sidewalks for Garden Street between Albion Street and Emerald Street, as well as a bikeway between Albion Street and the Greenbelt. The purpose of this project is to improve safety and increase connectivity for pedestrians and bicyclists. The purpose of this open house is also to give you an opportunity to tell us what you think once we've presented some of the information. The project description for this corridor is proposed sidewalks. The goals are to add curb and gutter and sidewalks on both sides of Garden Street from Albion to Emerald and reconstruct some of the existing sidewalks as necessary. We're also going to improve pedestrian ramps, add additions of bulb outs at key locations, and most of the on-street parking will be retained. However, some parking will be impacted. The proposed bikeway will add shared lane markings and wayfinding and signage to create a bikeway on Garden Street between Albion Street and the Greenbelt. Improved alignment were addressed at Garden Street and Franklin that we'll talk about later, and also an enhanced pedestrian bike signal at Garden Street and Franklin Road intersection. Next slide, please. So before we get started, here's an overview of the information we're going to cover for today's public information meeting. In a minute, we'll talk about the project team and introductions. Then we'll offer a project background, which will lead into the proposed design concept for Garden Street sidewalks and the bikeway project. Then we'll introduce the project schedule and next steps. And at the very end of the presentation, we'll offer questions and answers and do an answer session. Throughout the presentation, we'll take breaks for some quick polling questions, which are always fun, and also gather some feedback from all of you joining us today. We'll do our best to answer your questions, but we do ask that you please save your questions until the end of the presentation, and we'll address those as time allows at the end. We'll utilize the chat box for the question and answer session. So on the call today, we'll do introductions. We have members from both Ada County Highway District and JUB Engineers, which is the design consultant on the project. The Garden Street Bikeway project and sidewalk project is an Ada County Highway District project. So let's begin by introducing our ACHD team. First, we have Dave Rader. He's a project manager for ACHD. We have Christy Foltz-Ulrich, which is the communications contact. We have John Wasson, the traffic engineer, and Avery Forrester, which is also in communications. And then Meg McCarthy, the bike and ped coordinator for ACHD. I am Tim Blair, the project engineer for JUB Engineers. And our JUB team is comprised of transportation engineers to support the overall efforts of this project. And these include Matt Sipple is a project engineer, Cooper Felton is our design engineer, and Rebecca Coulter is our public involvement. And I will be the main spokesman for today's session, so for the remainder of the presentation. So before we dive into the details, we'd like to know more about you all. In a moment, a polling question will show up on the screen and I'll read it out loud. Please fill out the poll so we can get a feel of who you are at the open house and how this project relates to you. All right, poll question number 1. Do any of the following descriptions apply to you? This is a multiple choice question, so you can pick more than one. The first one is I live on Garden Street. The second one is I live in the neighborhood adjacent to Garden Street. I own or manage businesses or property on Garden Street. I regularly use Garden Street to get to work, school, or recreation. I use Garden Street to access the Greenbelt. I primarily use Garden Street for leisurely walks and bike rides. I do not use this segment of Garden Street or other. Please specify in the chat box. We'll give you a couple seconds here to include your submittals for question 1. Okay, Rebecca, let's see what we have here today. All right, this is great. 23% of the participants today live on Garden Street. 62% live in the neighborhood adjacent to Garden Street, which is great. 69, almost 70% use Garden Street to get to work or school. And same question again, is 69% use Garden Street to access the Greenbelt, and 54% use Garden Street for leisurely walks and bike rides. This is great. Thank you all for participating. All right, next we're going to jump into the project overview map to kind of explain the different projects we have going on. It also gives you a bird's eye view of what the overall project area looks like. Next slide. Okay. This is a simple project overview map to give you a visual of Garden Street area that we will be discussing today. The overview map shows the bikeway project limits as well as the sidewalk project limits. We wanted to call your attention to the Garden Street Franklin Road to Bethel Street segment. It's right in the middle, and it's identified in orange without blue lines on either side. This segment was in the 2012 Boise Central Bench Neighborhood Bicycle and Pedestrian Plan, and it was also a priority for sidewalks as designated in the 2019 plan. Again, it's designated with an orange line without thick blue lines. The two projects we'll be discussing today are the Albion Street to Franklin Road segment and the Bethel Street to Emerald Street. These are the orange lines with the thick blue outline that are depicted in these sidewalk projects for these two segments. The third project is depicted with a dotted blue line from Albion Street to the Boise Greenbelt. And it goes all the way up to the north, just north of the Jewel Street. We've highlighted some of the parts too to reference these projects, and we'll dive into these more as we continue on. Well, we're here to present the design for the Garden Street section of the Boise Central Bench Neighborhood Bike and Pedestrian Plan. We want to first offer some background information on how we got here and where we're at in the design phase. Thanks, Rebecca. The Garden Street Sidewalk and Bikeway Project is a first step in creating a completed north-south pedestrian and bicyclist route on Garden Street. It goes from Cassia Park all the way up to Boise Greenbelt. This project will improve safety, increase connectivity for pedestrians and bicyclists. And in 2012 and 10 years later in 2022, ACHD worked with neighborhoods on the Boise Central Bench Neighborhood Transportation Plan to improve walking and biking on the Boise Central Bench. Both plans identified Garden Street as a priority north-south corridor for pedestrians and bicycle facilities. On the next two slides, you'll see why the entirety of the improvement and project identified as priority projects for this sidewalk completion. All right, let's take a look at the bird's eye view of the Central Bench plan. All right, this first map, figure 4.1b, is from the updated 2022 plan. It shows the entire Central Bench area along with the pedestrians and ADA improvement projects identified in the project area. The blue lines show pedestrians and ADA improvement projects within the Central Bench project area. And here you can see highlighted in yellow is the Garden Street section. Next slide, please. This second map, figure 4.1c, is also from the 2022 plan. The dashed blue lines depict the recommended bikeway and bike treatment projects. And here you can see highlighted in yellow is the Garden Street section as well. Okay, next slide. Okay, we have another poll question for you. This is number 2. Rebecca, can you pull up this one? We are curious what type of transportation you primarily use in Garden Street. And you can pick more than one. Do you drive a car, truck, or motorcycle? Do you bike? Do you walk? Do you roll, wheelchair, scooter, etc.? Do you take public transportation, a bus or a van pool? Or you do not use this segment of Garden Street or other? Please specify in the chat. I'll give you a couple seconds to include your answers. Okay, Rebecca, what do we get here? Okay, 79% of our participants today drive a car, truck, or motorcycle. 64%, which is really high, use bike and also walk. And we do have someone that uses alternative motives with wheelchair, scooter, etc. And then 7% is other. This is great. Thank you. Okay. Okay, now that we've taken some time to look at the big picture, we can jump into the proposed design. We'll do this by looking at the overall proposed Garden Street layout and then dive into the design and details of each project section to look at the overall bikeway project and also discuss some of the features such as bulb outs and etc. All right, let's first take a look at a rendering that'll show you the design and typical section of Garden Street. Then we can offer a little more perspective on the roadway and sidewalks dimensions as well. Okay. So here you can see the overview of the proposed design. It includes sidewalks that are 7 feet wide on either side of Garden Street, and also on-street parking that's 7.5 feet wide. And then this segment up and down Garden Street also includes 10-foot travel lanes. On this exhibit, we've also shown a 2-foot strip on both sides of Garden Street for the purposes of purchasing right-of-way and property needed for this project. With this rendering, you can also see some of the other features in this typical section. The addition of curb and gutter and sidewalks on both sides of Garden Street. This is from Albion Street to Franklin Road and Bethel Street to Emerald Street. And we also will have to reconstruct some of the existing sidewalks as necessary. We'll be adding bulb outs at key locations and pedestrian ramps as well. Later in the presentation, we'll talk more about those and what they are and some of the benefits. Most of the on-street parking along this segment will be retained. However, some parking will be impacted, especially near bulb out locations. Okay, now that we've taken some time to look at the overview of the proposed design, next we'll zoom into more of the project-specific details of the street sections. Okay, this is the southernmost segment from Albion Street to Franklin Road. And I want to call your attention to the legend a little bit to describe what some of the line work and colors mean. The thin turquoise line shows the existing property lines. The thin purple line shows the properties to be purchased for the project. The dark gray is the new asphalt or pavement for the roadway. And then you can see proposed driveways and sidewalks along the segment are also depicted, as well as the proposed on-street parking, which is highlighted in yellow to be retained. We also included some symbols that represent some of the existing trees and landscaping within the project limits. These corridor features include, as I described before, curb, gutter, and sidewalks on both sides of Garden Street, and the addition of bulb outs and pedestrian ramps at key locations. And most on-street parking, again, will be retained. There will also be a slight intersection realignment of Garden Street at the intersection of Franklin Road, and a new pedestrian hybrid beacon on the west side of the intersection crossing Franklin Road. So I want to highlight real quickly, on the north end of this segment, there's the corridor of Garden Street from Franklin Road to Bethel Street was completed. The design was completed in 2019, and this is a separate project. Rebecca will put a link in the chat if you're interested in learning more about that specific project. As we said earlier in the presentation, the Garden Street Franklin to Bethel segment was identified in the 2012 Boise Central Bench and Neighborhood Bicycle and Pedestrian Plan as a priority project for sidewalks and was designed in 2019. Thank you, Rebecca. Okay, the next segment we're going to talk about is on Garden Street from Bethel Street to Emerald Street. This is also similar to the design of Albion Street to Franklin Road. Rebecca, can you pull up the next slide, please? Okay, similar to the previous segment, the legend is the same and the exhibit is the same. We can show existing property lines, also the right-of-way to be purchased. The Garden Street roadway is also hatched in dark gray, driveway segments and new sidewalk, and on-street parking. Okay, let's go to the next poll question. Thanks, Rebecca. Question number 3. How do you feel about the sidewalk design for Garden Street? This is for the Albion to Franklin and Bethel to Emerald segments. Do you strongly disagree? Do you disagree? Are you not sure? Do you agree, or do you strongly agree with the proposed improvements? We'll give you a couple seconds to answer. Okay, Rebecca. Okay, we have 15% that strongly disagree. We have 23% that are not sure. We have 38% that agree and 23% that strongly agree. We appreciate you taking the time to include your submittals today, and it helps us make informed decisions as we go forward. Okay, next we're going to talk about the Garden Street Bikeway project and discuss the striping plan and proposed improvements for this project. Okay, Rebecca, can you pull up the next slide? Thank you. Okay, for the Bikeway project, here we can see the Garden Street corridor and an overview of the existing bike lanes that are shown in purple. You also see the project limits that are in highlighted in orange. And just for your information, north is to the right. So from left to right is the Garden Street corridor project. The existing pathway in Greenbelt is a dark bluish color. The existing bike route is maroon. And the future pathway connection, which was identified by the city of Boise, is also included on here as a future pathway project, and that's hatched in the dashed blue color. The contact information for the city will be posted in the chat if you have any questions regarding this project. At the Garden Street and Franklin Road, we have the proposed bike and ped signal, which is also known as a pedestrian hybrid beacon. It's depicted in the black circle. At the Garden Street and Emerald Street, we have an existing traffic signal that will include an enhanced bicycle detection. It's depicted in the orange circle. And then Albion Street to the Greenbelt connection at the north will include bike lanes and sharrows that are depicted in the green circle. With that, the Bikeway project will add shared lane markings and wayfinding and signage to create a bikeway on Garden Street between Albion and the Greenbelt. The improved alignment on Garden Street and Franklin Road intersection will help for the pedestrian hybrid beacon and crossing. And also the enhanced pedestrian hybrid bike signal at Garden Street and Franklin Road intersection is included. Okay. We're going to make this interactive. We have another poll question for you. This is number 4. How do you feel about the Garden Street bikeway design from Albion to the Greenbelt? Do you strongly disagree? Do you disagree? Are you not sure? Do you agree, or do you strongly agree? I'll give you a couple seconds to answer. Okay, Rebecca, whenever you're ready. Okay, we have question number 4. We have 14% that strongly disagree. We have 21% that disagree, 7% that are not sure, 36% that agree, and also 21% that strongly agree. So it's a very good outcome. Thank you for your input. Okay. We've talked a little bit about bulb outs earlier as we review the corridor sections, but let's discuss those more in a little more detail so we can understand what they are and the benefits and impacts that they provide. So bulb outs, what are they? And where will they be, and how do they impact parking? Bulb outs, also known as curb extensions, extend the sidewalk or curb line out to the parking lane. This reduces the effective street width. Bulb outs significantly improve pedestrian crossings by reducing the pedestrian crossing distance. They also increase visually and physically narrowing the roadway by improving the ability of the pedestrians and motorists to see each other and reducing the time that pedestrians are in the street and allowing space for the installation of the ADA compliant pedestrian ramps. Some of the benefits of the bulb outs are they slow traffic and they're traffic calming. They provide space to install ADA compliant pedestrian ramps on existing sidewalks where they are otherwise too narrow. They also provide additional visibility and protection for pedestrians when crossing the street. And they reduce pedestrian exposure to vehicles and traffic by reducing crossing distance. Some of the challenges with bulb outs, they require eliminating some of the on-street parking to the intersections and where they're installed. And sometimes they may be difficult for large delivery trucks to navigate. Okay. Next slide, Rebecca. Next, we're going to take a look at the overall schedule and next steps. Okay, as you can see here, we began design in the fall of 2021. We're now at a point of gathering the public input and information. And then in late 2022 and early 2023, we will finalize our design. And then in early 2023, we'll also look and work on purchasing property that's needed for the project. The anticipated construction date will take place in 2024. And then your comments are always welcome, and it's also helpful if you guys can, if we can receive those by November 16th, 2022, when the comment period closes. ACHD will then review and address the comments received from the public. Okay, next slide, Rebecca. Okay, this concludes our presentation, and now we'll open up the chat for comments. Please be patient with us as we try to address all the comments that are coming in. As a reminder, we are accepting comments as a part of this open house through November 16th again, so please use the survey link in the chat to offer more feedback. We will also add Dave Rader, the product manager's contact information from ACHD in the chat box and on the next screen. please contact and reach out to Dave with specific questions. And if we are unable to discuss those questions in great detail today, please feel free to have an offline conversation with Dave.
All right, Tim, I'm going to chime in here for just a minute because it looks like we have a comment coming in from Sean Hess. You forgot to mention the downside of increasing competition between bikes and cars for space in the travel lane. And that comment is regarding to bulb outs. And it seems that he might add a couple more questions in the chat, but that's the first comment that we've received thus far.
Okay, thank you. Rebecca, I'm going to ask Meg, are you on today?
Yeah, I'm here.
Would you mind maybe taking a shot at addressing that question?
Yeah, absolutely. So as Tim said, I'm the bike ped coordinator at ACHD, and it will reduce the travel lane width where the bulb outs are, but the chances that a cyclist and a car are going to be there at the same time are probably pretty small. And also part of what we heard from the neighborhood and part of the purpose of the project is traffic calming. And so that friction for the space between bikes and people driving kind of creates that friction and helps calm the traffic.
Thanks, Meg.
Yeah.
All right, and it looks, Tim, like a follow-up question from Sean is, how will ACHD be planning to pave Garden Street? Chip seal is not adequate, and the quality of recent repaving on Emerald is not adequate for Garden Street.
Thanks, Rebecca. I can answer that question for Sean. And the Garden Street typical section and proposed construction is a full rebuild. It's not a chip seal along the corridor. And I don't have the information to speak to the other project, unfortunately.
And then we are receiving another message from Ben. Was adding a stop sign to Morris Hill and Garden considered? Currently, there is no stop between Emerald and the railroad.
That is that's the project that we are not talking about today, but I'm not sure. Dave, do you have an answer to that question?
Sorry, I was reading the chat. Can you repeat that question?
Yes, absolutely. This question is regarding adding a stop sign to Morris Hill, if that was considered. Currently, there is no stop between Emerald and the railroad. And I will go ahead and add that that Garden Street to Bethel link back in the chat just for reference.
Yeah, we can certainly evaluate that request. It's not included at the project at this point, but happy to take a look with the project team.
Thanks, Dave.
All right, another question coming in from Sean. Are there options other than detectable warning pavers?
I'm trying to understand the question, Rebecca, a little bit more. I don't know.
Okay. Sean, if you wouldn't mind adding a little bit of background information or a little bit more detail on what you're referencing there. And while you're doing that, we're going to jump along to another question that we're receiving. What is the plan with the trees that are in the way of the sidewalk and PRW? Terry, would you mind giving a full description of the PRW acronym? And as we're waiting on that, as far as plan with trees that are in the way of the sidewalk, Tim, is that something that we can speak to, or do we want to kick that over to David?
Yeah, I can speak to that. The trees that will be in the way of the sidewalk, for the most part, need to be removed along the corridor to accommodate the width of the street.
All right, and Alex has chimed in. Curious as to why no sidewalks on the stretch between Emerald and the Greenbelt. We need the narrowing sidewalks will provide, as speeding is a critical issue on that stretch.
And I guess I'll take a shot at that, Rebecca. Go ahead, Meg. Hey, would you like to answer that one?
I definitely, sure. Yeah, I can. So I think that in that section, we've heard from the neighbors before, when we took the central bench, that sidewalk is something that folks want there. The street does get a little bit more narrow there. And so putting in sidewalks will require more right of way. But if you reach out to Dave, he can put you in contact with me, and I can kind of show you how to put in a project request, and we can talk more about what that entails, because we have heard that.
And just to follow up with that, Meg, just on the Boise Central Bench plan that was adopted in 2022, that segment was not listed as a priority project for sidewalks.
Yeah. And I guess too, there's less traffic on that section since it does dead end.
Mhm.
All right, so, and then moving along, Sean chimed in again with another question as far as tree retention. And so we have added Dave Rader's contact information on the screen for all of you to be able to jot down, but just to circle back on the same responses as earlier that Tim had mentioned, the 2-foot strip along the sidewalk, those are conversations to reach out with ACHD for the purpose of purchasing property, for the purpose of making the project take place. So just to respond back to that question again, Dave's contact information is on the screen there. So please reach out to him with questions regarding that. Byron, we have a comment from you. Are underground utility upgrades, water, sewer, irrigation planned for this project? Tim?
Thanks, Rebecca. To my knowledge, yes, water upgrades are included in this project. And I think, Dave, I'll refer to you on the other upgrades if we are aware of that yet.
Yeah, I don't think we've know with 100% certainty about new sewer lines. I think as of right now, there's no sewer line upgrades, but this could change. So.
And a comment that we just received in saying that it seems like the best / most efficient way to calm traffic is to add stop signs at each block. Cost efficient. There's a correction there. A comment coming in from George on that. And then another comment we have coming in. Hello, some sections of the design use curb extensions where no street parking is present, for an example, between Denton and Fairmont. At the same time, there are many sections where it could be used but wasn't, for another example, between Glen and Franklin on the east side. What are the considerations for that? Curb extensions allow ramps moved off the sidewalk and provide more space for streetscape, stormwater management, etc.
Tim, this is John. Do you want me to answer the stop sign question?
Sure, John, if you could address that, that'd be helpful.
Sure.
Thank you.
So the primary use of the stop sign is to assign right of way at a location. It is not to slow people down. In a perfect gridded network such as the north end or the east end, where we're able to install stop signs at every other location, every other block, it can work, but it doesn't always work in locations like this. And if you have a street that has a high volume and a street that has a low volume, you end up with a very large differential in people on the street. So if you're on Garden Street, and Garden Street, as an example, has 100 cars and the side street has 10 cars a day, and I know I'm making it very simple, you only see a car there 1 out of every 10 times. And at some point, somebody's going to say, who is the idiot engineer that installed stop signs at this location? Because I never see a car here. And unfortunately, as humans, we have a tendency to sometimes ignore those stop signs that we don't feel are useful. And that can lead to an increase in crashes. And that's why we're very cautious when we install stop signs to make sure that they meet the state and the federal criteria for the installation of those devices.
Thanks, John. I appreciate that.
Tim, and I'm happy, this is Meg again. I'm happy to answer the question about the bulb out locations and how we determine those as a project team. So we try to, in every single project, we're really trying to balance the needs of everybody. And one of the things that we've heard a lot, as Tim mentioned, with curb extensions or bulb outs, is they make turning movements difficult for buses or large vehicles. And in some of those cases, bulb outs were proposed, but we coordinate with every school district that we work with. And often if there are turning movements of a school bus at those locations, we cannot install bulb outs at those places. So I think that's part of the reason why you're not seeing them there and not seeing them throughout the corridor.
Thanks, Meg.
All right, so I'm circling back to the chat here. It looks like we're caught up on some of those questions. We have about 15 messages in addition to a few more that are still in the queue here. So I'm going to keep plugging along. Next question. There is land along the canal along the south end of Garden. Could this space be better used for more off-street parking?
I can take a shot at that, Rebecca. That southernmost section is ACHD right away, and currently we're projected to use that as stormwater storage, which is much needed for this project. When we install curb and gutter along a roadway segment, we also have to accommodate surface water runoff, and that's what that is currently designated for.
Perfect. And then a follow-up question from the same user. Has a stop sign been considered at Albion and Garden on Albion Street?
I'm going to refer to John again, if he wouldn't mind answering that question.
I'm sorry, would you please repeat the question? I blanked out there for a half sec.
Sorry.
No problems at all. So, John, has a stop sign been considered at Albion and Garden on Albion Street?
I don't recall a recent request, although we probably get several hundred requests on a yearly basis. I can write it down and take a look at it. And if that individual would like to give me a call sometime tomorrow on my office line at 387-6151, that's 387-6151, I'd be glad to get the contact information and take a look.
All right, thank you. All right, scrolling down through. For people who like to use scooters or skateboards on the sidewalk, the yellow dots are Bane. Oh, I'm gonna go ahead and mute you there, John. Sorry about that. A comment there from Sean, and then a question: can the trees be transplanted?
I can take a shot at that, Rebecca. I mean, it depends, I think, upon the size and where it would be transplanted to. And I'm not a certified arborist or anything in that nature, but it's something that I think we could look into if there's a special request for a tree to be moved or relocated.
Okay.
Yeah, Tim, I just want to jump in here. If anyone has questions about trees on their property, please just reach out to me. I'm happy to look at your property with you in the project case by case.
Thank you, David.
Thanks, David.
A comment that has come in: my overall concern is that we're treating this project as another standardized ACHD project. Garden connects at least 3 neighborhoods directly to the Greenbelt. So a concern right there. And then a question following that: will ACHD do anything to replace the loss of trees? And again, circling back, this seems to be something that is popping up a lot in the chat about the trees, and David just chimed in on that. So his contact information is on the screen. So please reach out to him directly for one-on-one conversations about managing that. And Christy just dumped his contact information into the chat there. So we're good. I'm going to try to scroll down here. If I'm missing some, I apologize. I'm trying to grab as many as I can. They keep coming in pretty quickly here. So I'm going to start grabbing questions. Let's see here. Does Garden Street and Emerald Street, the Garden Street, Emerald Street intersection traffic volume justify turning lanes? Or can that space be used more efficiently to save money on pavement and increase pedestrian safety?
Give me a sec here, Rebecca. I'm going to pull up our current design again.
No worries. And for those, if I want you to know that every comment that is being put in this chat is being documented, all the concerns. So right now I'm trying to catch up on very specific on the questions that are coming through. So if there are concerns and statements of comments, those have been documented. And we do, and like, just to continue to reiterate that the contact information is on the screen here to dive in a little bit deeper if you want to continue the conversation. But please know that this chat box does serve as a venue for offering perspective and concern. So those comments and those issues that are being dropped in the chat that are not specific questions are being documented. So thank you very much for putting those issues and concerns into the chat for the project team to consider.
And I guess, Rebecca, just circling back to the turning lane comment, and John, feel free to chime in here. Currently, there are existing turning lanes on Franklin Road, both northbound and southbound onto Garden Street, and those are proposed to be retained at this time. And to my knowledge, they are warranted. And we are not proposing to add turn lanes or left-hand turn bays on Garden Street.
Perfect. And I know the project team is a little bit ahead of me here and putting contact information in the chat. So bear with me as I continue to scroll down and grab the comments as they're coming in. So Byron says, thank you for all of this design. I'm very excited to use the upgraded sidewalks, ramps, and bike lanes. I appreciate the amount of work that was required to accommodate and balance multimodal needs along this very old road. Ben says, I'd like to echo Byron and greatly appreciate the focus and consideration on pedestrians and bikers rather than just cars. Hopefully these changes will naturally bring less large vehicle traffic down this road. Question, can we opt out for the bulb outs if it affects parking in front of our house?
Rebecca, I'll take a shot at that question. I guess it depends on the location and where. And if you have a concern, then I would, I guess request that you reach out to Dave, and we can, Dave can discuss those locations with you and see if it still meets the project needs.
Okay. All right. With that, we are caught up on the specific questions that came through in the chat, and I know that the ACHD team did a great job of dumping their contact information in the chat. Again, on screen, I am going to put 2 more links in the chat here for everyone. One is to include and add again the survey link that is active and live after this presentation is through. So please jump on the survey and take the survey, provide your comments and offer feedback there. And then in addition to that, the overall project website link is also included in the chat where you can pull this presentation, the exhibit, zoom in and out of those presentation exhibits, get familiar with the proposed design. And then with any questions that you do have, please reach out to the project team. I'm seeing a couple more comments come into the chat, so I'm going to take a minute to shift gears and read that for a second.
Rebecca, there was a follow-up question, I guess, regarding the left-hand turn bay, and that was actually at the intersection of Emerald and Garden. So my apologies, I misunderstood that. And it's to my knowledge, yes, the left-hand turn bay is warranted, and I'm sure John can clarify that question in more detail than I can. And currently, the design is as proposed, is to retain that left-hand turn bay.
Okay. And we do have a couple more questions coming in. One, why this project and why now?
I can help answer that, Tim,
Okay,
if
yes.
you'd like. Okay, great. So we have this one section of Garden Street from Franklin to Bethel planned, and we went back and forth whether we were going to do sidewalk on one side or both sides. And then we had this as a bikeway and sidewalk project identified in our neighborhood plans. And ACHD is really trying to adopt a policy of like going in once and disrupting a neighborhood, I guess, for a little bit longer than over and over again for multiple years. And so that's part of the reason why we're doing this project now. And we've also heard from lots of people when we do our integrated 5-year work plan outreach that this project has been important to people, and people want to see this project come through and want to see a stronger connection to the Greenbelt for bike ped elements. And part of the reason too is for that enhanced crossing at Franklin as well with the PHB. We really wanted to be able to get that crossing in.
Just a minute.
We're able to do that as well.
Sorry, Meg. I don't mean to cut you off, but the connection's a little bit spotty. So I just wanted to.
That's okay. Oh no.
Oh, no, that's all right. Thank you. Thank you for offering that information. But I just want to clarify, it sounds like you were referencing back to that Central Bench neighborhood plan and the time frame. So I'm going to go ahead and again, put some more information into the chat here for folks who really want to dive in and learn a little bit more about why now. I'm going to put the link to those Central Bench neighborhood plans in the chat for a little bit more information. And again, the project time frame, the why, and that information is offered on the project website as well. Another comment coming through, these bike lanes and sidewalks are funneling bikers and walkers ultimately to the Greenbelt. Yes, there is less road traffic on the Central Rim neighborhood portion of the project, but perhaps the most bike and walk traffic is at the culmination of all bike and walk traffic from Cassia Park all the way to the Greenbelt. It's not as if bikers and walkers turn onto Emerald before the Central Rim stretch. Do we have anyone on the project team who can speak to that?
Rebecca, I think Meg would be the best one to speak to that, but I think she's having a connection problem right now.
Okay. And again, Meg's contact information is in the chat there. So thank you, Alex, for that concern. We have it documented, and we can reach out to Meg directly for a response there. I am going back and circling back up. I was scrolling through super quick, and I know I may have missed some comment or some earlier questions. So one question that I'm going back and checking on is, how is ACHD planning around the existing tow truck site?
Dave, do you want to answer that question?
Yeah, so I believe that that question pertains to the other project in between Franklin and Bethel. I don't know how that project's addressing, the towing site, but I'm happy to follow up with you on that. Or if you put your contact information in the chat.
Okay. Yes, and so that one came from George. And George, I believe that you can respond directly. I'll send a direct message to you as well to be sure that we're able to address that for you. Another question from George. My hope is that we have a vision for something like the Harrison Boulevard for biking. For example, it's super hot to bike on Garden right now due to the lack of tree canopy. Are there any plans to add trees to create some sort of canopy or sun protection?
Rebecca, I can answer that question. Just currently with our proposed design, we don't have any plans to add trees outside the right-of-way as we show it now. So I think that may be handled just through the property purchase process potentially. But
okay, yeah, thank you, Tim. And another similar question from Ben along the same lines there. Will ACHD do anything to replace the loss of trees and add back the tree canopy? So so both of those questions, both of those questions are along the same topic. So thank you, Ben and George, for offering that information. And we have it documented here now, and as part of the preliminary design considerations. Sorry, I'm just going back and forth to be sure that I'm not missing any of the comments coming through.
And it looks like
Yeah,
Christy added a link to the other project in here as well.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Christy.
Dave, did you have something to say? Sorry. I didn't mean to
Yeah, I was
interrupt.
just gonna say if a tree falls within private property, ACHD and is impacted by the project, ACHD will value the tree and compensate for the trees. But again, those are trees that are within private property impacted by the project, not in the right of way.
Okay.
Thank you, Dave, for that clarification.
All right. And I am just circling back here really quick to see some of the questions that I may have scrolled past and be sure that we're addressing everything that's coming in. Let's see here. What was the education process ACHD is planning for this rollout? And that might be a communications question for either Christy or Avery, but the project information, I will dump that again here. There has been quite a bit of outreach that's taken place, and I'm going to dump the project website back in the chat. And is there anything that we can address in addition to the time frame and outreach materials and information that have been provided on the website? Christy or Avery?
Rebecca, can you repeat the question? I didn't quite catch that.
Yeah, absolutely. What is the education process ACHD is planning for this rollout?
So as far as gathering public involvement, we sent out mailers that people in the neighborhood should have already received. There's signs on the streets. We posted on social media. We've had ads in the newspaper. We're doing pretty much everything we can to get the word out, to let people know that we're seeking their comments. When it comes time for construction, we will also be sending out notifications as well, letting people know when that will happen. But that's in 2024, so we have a little ways to go before that comes around.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Christy. And that's actually a pretty decent segue into Terry's most recent question. How long do you expect this project to take? And Tim, we're looking at 2024. Is that right? Is there any more additional information that we can provide there?
That is correct, Rebecca. That's the scheduled construction year, and it's for all three projects along that segment. So the entire corridor would be worked on at the same time. So we're limiting those efforts to coming back year after year and constructing year after year.
All right, perfect. And then let's see here. A couple more questions are starting to circle in here just a little bit. I do want to note the scheduled time frame for the public open house is until 6:30. So we're coming up here a little bit close to the end, and it looks like the questions are starting to free up a little bit. But we are going to take some time to answer these remaining questions that are circling in at the end here. So let me get back to the chat here. Can free space at larger bulb outs be used to add some trees? That appears to be only spaces within the right of way to add streetscape. So I'm going to repeat that. Can free space at larger bulb outs be used to add some trees?
I'm going to defer to Dave. Can you take a shot at answering that question, Dave, or we can defer?
I might be able to help answer. Is my connection okay?
Yeah.
It's a little, yeah. No, sorry, I didn't mean to speak over you, Tim. Yep, you're good. If it does start to get chatty, or if there's a little bit of chatter feedback back and forth, would you mind putting the response in the chat for us?
For sure. Yes,
Okay.
yes. So to answer that question, we require for psilocybin trees that have root barriers, we have to have at least 6 feet of space. And then for a regular tree, we have to have 8 feet of space. And so being able to put something that big in a curb bulb out, I don't know if it would be enough space. And on top of it, it might obstruct the view of people trying to cross the street if there is a tree or something impeding the visibility at the corners.
Perfect. You came through beautifully. Thank you, Meg. And a comment from Sean saying, thanks to Dave. As a neighborhood, we are asking ACHD to put a value on the trees, and that goes beyond their value for the individual property owner. They have a community value that needs to be balanced with with the needs for transportation. So thank you for that perspective, Sean. It looks here like, oh, and again, a comment from Kristen. We have beautiful mature trees along Garden. Loss of trees will certainly change the feel of our street. It looks like we have another question that came in here. Do we have an idea of when the city will be adding the access from Garden to Cassia Park over the canal? Will the canal be restricted at the same time as the road work? I've heard part of the canal will be enclosed.
Yeah, so I can drop Karen Gallagher's contact information in the chat. She is the city contact person for this project, so I'll drop her contact in her email in the chat, and please reach out to Karen.
Thanks,
Okay.
Dave.
Thank you, David. Sean says that ease of car use should not always outweigh the livability of the neighborhood. And Terry, once construction begins in 2024, when is the plan for completion?
So, yeah, I can speak to that. So we would target ending construction in September, October of 2024. That's just kind of a target at this point. As we get into construction and get more details about the schedule, ACHD can kind of communicate that. I guess we can communicate about the construction schedule in more detail when we get there.
Perfect, thank you. And then a suggestion here that maybe some water-wise grasses need to be taken into consideration as part of this project. All right, okay, so, oh, there we go, Sean, one question coming in at the last minute, here we go. How is the project being funded? Are there federal funds involved? ACHD, is that something that you might be able to speak to?
Yeah, this is a locally funded project, Sean. There are no federal funds.
Thank you. All right. So that concludes the questions that we have coming into that have come into the chat within the time frame that was allotted for the public open house. But again, I know I continue to put this information in the chat, but please visit the project website, take the survey. Dave Rader's contact information is still up on screen for you to reach out to him directly and have one-on-one conversations if you feel like your concerns or your comments were not addressed in full detail, or if you have any additional follow-up questions, please continue to reach out to the project team. We're here and happy to answer the questions for you. And we will provide all of this information over to ACHD so that they have all of these concerns and all of these questions and all of these comments for the purpose of being able to address them. So we've gotten through those questions, and thank you for taking the time to do that. Like we've mentioned before, the online open house is active and taking place through November 16th. So please, we want to continue to know what you think, and really take some time to dive into the presentation, dive into those exhibits that are available on the project website. Zoom in and zoom out. They're really high resolution, and I know that when we pull them up on screen, sometimes they're a little bit hard to see. So take some time to familiarize yourself with those and become familiar with the design and continue to offer some feedback. With that, thank you so much, everybody, for the information that you provided in the chat and the great questions that were provided and the issues and concerns. And I'm going to kick it back over to Tim so that he can wrap things up and if there are any final words.
Thanks, Rebecca. And thanks again to our participants for joining us this evening. We really appreciate your input and listening to our presentation. And also want to thank ACHD, Dave and Christy and John and Avery and Meg for participating with us this evening to answer questions and contribute. So everyone have a great evening, and we look forward to your continued input online. Thank you.